I'm Rob Licuria, senior editor at Gold Derby. I'm here with Billy Brown, who co-stars in Working Man. It's about a factory worker who loses his job, but he defiantly shows up every day at work after the plant is closed. Billy, you play Walter. He develops a friendship with the central protagonist, Allery, played by Peter Gerety. And there's more to him to that. There's more to him than that, though. What was your primary takeaway about what drives this guy?
Primary was, this is a man who has a past which he has not contended with fully. He has not faced without giving the real juicy bits of the ribeye away. We use a meat reference, or the veggie lovers, they're sauteed broccoli.
Oh, I know.
So Walter Brewer, as I bring him to life, is a man who has a past that he's not contended with. He has a future that he is unable to identify, and we understand why that is. It is his makeup, it's his composition, not just as a man, but the mental health that he is doing his best to deal with. And ultimately, it becomes really a godsend, a blessing, as that is what drives him to make decisions that will impact Allery Parkes, played by the great Peter Gerety, and his wife, Talia Shire, two-time Academy Award nominee, who plays Iola Parkes, his wife. So Walter Brewer, in his own composition and his own struggles, has found a way to express himself in an outward, very proactive manner, which in I won't say an able-bodied, but someone who doesn't have the mental health concerns and issues would have chosen a more conventional path, which ultimately would not have affected Allery Parkes to deal with his loss, his grief, the family tragedy of he and his wife Iola, and ultimately in this fictional town of Orange, the last factory closing down, which makes Allery Parkes really a leader and a hero among men that he never had envisioned himself to be. He was a guy who moves about town, as Peter Gerety has said multiple times, without really any friends. He doesn't have that base, and some of it's his own choosing because of the family tragedy, and other is just the makeup of that man. But in Walter Brewer, there comes that first and singular friendship that affects both men in a way that they could have never imagined, in the most positive ways.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about friendship, because there's a few themes in this film that really resonated with me, and the friendship aspect I found really interesting, because you're right, Allery, he's a character who hasn't had many friendships, if at all, apart from the connection he has with his wife and of course his child. And then he meets Walter, and they're like chalk and cheese, but for some reason they band together and have this mutual respect. Did that resonate with you? And what was it about that friendship that you thought was the strongest or most compelling part of the film?
For me, it was Robert. It was the exact opposites of these two men, outwardly speaking. And then you dive further in the layers that our writer-director Robert Brewer created, that the tapestry that he had woven allowed me, upon first reading of Working Man screenplay and discussions with our director-writer Robert Brewer, to see the depth of Walter Brewer, which really paralleled the depth and loss and grief of Allery Parkes. They don't speak about it, these two men.
No.
Yet they're drawn into one another. And yes, you could say that I knew about some of these things in Allery Parkes' life because of the scuttlebutt in the neighborhood, because of, the great Chicago actor who plays my neighbor, Sal, played by the role of Benny. There are things he shares with me that I have gleaned from being in this town for 8 months. But again, Walter Brewer is not of the right, he's not the right frame of mind where he can really articulate it and act upon it in a calculating sort of way. but he does recognize in Allery Parkes, here's a guy who needs more, who needs something.
Yeah.
What can I do to give him that which he needs and shut up the other neighbors? Who are they to talk about this guy?
Yeah.
He walks to work every day. He goes there and does something that no one is aware of. But I want a piece of that. Maybe there's something that I can do to extricate him from that purgatory that he is in, that Talia Shire has spoken of. And it's a simple act, man. When I read of, you recall, giving, I give Allery Parkes the car keys, my truck keys. You drive. It's a simple act, but yet it's got so much weight.
Yeah.
So much weight on, and for reasons that the, our movie audience will discover, to Allery Parkes. The simple fact that he hasn't driven, there's a reason why he hasn't driven. And what does that mean to drive now, at this moment, after having broken into the factory? Rule after rule after rule, convention for him has been overturned by Walter Brewer, but for good cause.
Yeah.
And, those things, when I read it, I said, again, there's a reason why Walter Brewer is doing it. And as I understood the causes, maybe not the ultimate motivations, but the causes of it, I said, this is a fascinating look into, human character and how he mixes in with those around him.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The script is so sophisticated and moving in that way.
Right.
And
right.
You know what's really interesting? I have just interviewed Talia Shire, as you know, and she mentioned the purgatory aspect, and also another aspect that didn't occur to me, because it's maybe not in my frame of mind. She said, the Walter character is an angel. It's like his guardian angel, that he needed Walter to pull him out of this funk and this purgatory and this loop that he was in, this pain loop. What do you think? Do you agree that Walter was kind of like an angel and very flawed, but necessary?
It very, very much necessary to both myself and Allery. I'd never heard that before. Talia eloquently spoke about it in these last few weeks, but she has numerous times made that observation. I have to agree with her. I hadn't thought about it. When I approached Walter Brewer, though, that wasn't the subtlety that I was aware of. That's more of an external observation.
Yeah.
Someone with the luxury to look at Walter Brewer in the dynamic of that brewing relationship with his newfound friend, Allery Parkes. But yes, 100%. Walter Brewer does things that no other neighbor was willing to do or maybe capable of doing. And in a sense, not that even his wife, Allery Parkes' wife, that Iola Parkes was able to do for the man she loves the most.
Yeah.
There's an absolute stranger, as maybe angels might be considered. We look at It's a Wonderful Life and Clarence and in the end when he pulls our hero out of that suicide mission. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's beautiful what Robert Gerety did in beat after beat through the transitions and all the various rhythms of Working Man, to have Walter Brewer continue to advance, metaphorically speaking, those footsteps that Allery Parkes was taking to and from the factory.
Yeah.
But now he's taking real steps.
Yeah.
Real steps towards an ultimate renewed love affair with his wife and reconciliation of the tragedy that befallen the family. And then his place, as a man, the reason to get up every day. Yes, to work, to have an opportunity to provide for your family, for yourself, to have that daily mission, to accomplish what you didn't accomplish yesterday and what more you can accomplish today. And those are the things I really feel that Walter Brewer is able to bring to Allery Parkes and ultimately benefit myself as well in in those penultimate moments.
Isn't it interesting that Working Man was made last year or whenever it was, a while ago, when disenfranchisement and unemployment was obviously a very important problem in the Rust Belt and all over the country. But
Yeah.
now with the pandemic hitting, it's become like so front of mind. It's you could see lines and lines of people at food banks and all kinds of really awful things that we're noticing. I mean, do you find it interesting how prescient this film kind of has become for the world that we live in?
I mean, it's wild.
Yeah.
It really is. It's really wild to imagine that that Bobby Jury wrote this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And continued to craft it and polish it. And our executive producer, Clark Peterson of Monster with Charlize Theron, he came on board early and really helped to shepherd Working Men to arrive now, fully formed, in the can, and getting ridiculously high accolades and praise for a movie that was shot on a very thin budget, but with a big tentpole passion, if you will.
Yeah.
All involved. So to have the storyline, as you so succinctly described, match and pair with what all of us are contending with now, not just in the US, but globally.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make it up, beat for beat.
Yeah.
As people are faced with unemployment, and as you said, I mean, food lines.
Yeah, it's amazing. I never would have thought that I'd be seeing that on the news, and here we are.
Right. And then to have Robert's words and what we have been able to bring to life on the screen, really have crystalline parallels of experience to what, again, not just Americans are going through, but really globally.
Yeah.
It's tragic, but fascinating.
Yeah.
At the same time.
The other fascinating aspect for me, if you don't mind me saying,
yeah,
the casting's really interesting in this film because all three of the main characters, like the non-Chicago locals, because I know a lot of the cast was local, have this unusual vulnerability. So, for example, Peter Gerety's character would not have been the same had it been played by someone who doesn't have that really touching vulnerability that Peter brings to the role. Talia is the same. And for you could have been more one note, perhaps. The script is amazing, but what I'm trying to say is not very succinctly, sorry, is that you brought a really interesting vulnerability to this role that I actually think, from what I've seen you in other projects, you do as well. What is it about the way you tackle a character to make him feel or seem authentically vulnerable?
First it starts with the words on the page. If they aren't there, for all of us involved, it's really hard to then manifest something that isn't already in existence, at least in the writer or director's imagination as written. Yeah. So really, much credit does continuously go to Robert Jury. And then on my own preparation, I really think back to, turn this phone off. I really think back to my theater coach, who sadly just passed away, Janet Alahante, and she would say, find especially for guys like me, meaning 6'2", 219, I don't look like the vulnerable type.
That's what I mean. Like, yeah.
Right. And then going against the opposite in the choices, it does really help to allow, the audience to come on inside, because you're seeing something that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And you're finding those, the vulnerabilities, the openness that we all have.
Of course.
But many times, more often than not, what do we want to do? We want to put the mask up and put up the barrier, build a little wall. And the interesting thing about the human nature is when those barriers, those walls have little breaches, little cracks, and that inner light shines through. And then you see and experience what really is on the inside. And Robert had written it, and my goal is to always find those moments and find those ways to explore those rather than the superficial.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it obviously paid off because I found myself really drawn to the Walter character. I didn't know
Thank
what
you.
his motivations were. Obviously, you figure that out as the film progresses.
Yeah,
And,
right.
and I kept desperately wondering what's going on behind those eyes, because there's something off. There's something that he's missing or that he needs. And so, yeah, that must be a particularly challenging thing to get right. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and you know it is, and you don't, you know, as I had talked to you know, Robert many times on set, I never really know if it's, you know, if it's right. I guess right's, and for me, I can never approach it from a right or wrong. Then, you know, as the actor,
yeah,
then you're in a little bit of a box, because as humans we think about, was that the right decision, right business call, was that the right choice with our family? But you know, when you're in the moment of scene by scene by scene, you've really got to trust what's happening at that moment. Your director, and Robert would always say, you know, yeah, we're good, Billy. We can move on. That's good. 2 takes, we're great, man. And I'd say, you sure? I could. No, we're good. And think about this, Robert. This is a guy who worked on it for 10 years. That's his baby. But Daddy had the wherewithal, the self-confidence with his DP, Piero Basso, great cinematographer. And they really came in prepared. You know, didn't have days where, and I've been on movies, we have seasoned directors and producers and video villages filled with cell phones and people talking and a lot of business happening. All sorts of crap service you could ever imagine, but they're not getting anything done on set. They're not making it happen. The opposite happened in Working Man. These guys came in, they're ready, they're prepared. And you can ask Peter and Talia, our Chicago actors, our crew, everybody's grateful. And the effect is we show up ready and we make our less than 30-day shooting schedule an absolute success. And you can't ask for anything better than that for what we do, regardless of budget.
And then that brings me to my final question, because the film could have remained in that same tone throughout. But what happens towards the end is, after Walter's pulled Allery through his pain, it's Allery who has to say to Walter, it's time to move on. And the film ends on a really hopeful note. And I was really, really happy about that. Because sometimes you don't want it to be that way. You think, oh, that's so cliche. But this film needed that. What did you think about the way it ended?
I can't say I teared up, but it was close when I first read it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, to have all my efforts in the movie validated for those couple of beats, you know, I'll give anything away with those couple of beats, in the place where we come to find me having then been met by Allery Parkes, you know, I said, come on, hey, that's how we go out. So it's not a complete over the top, you know, as you said, unbelievable victory, but it's just enough to say what needed to be said between these two men, and ultimately how their efforts, no matter clumsy or ill-advised or, you know, smashing of some rules, but really how it came to impact the two of them.
Yeah.
In a most profound and really life-changing of ways, which is the most critical thing. And then ultimately we can really look into their eyes and see the impact of those in the neighborhood and those factory workers, because we know, based on what you and I have seen, all those factory workers had the same kind of joyous benefit in the knowledge that Allery Parkes shares with me in those final moments. So I think Robert did a great crafting of that relationship, which propels us into those into this final scene with Allery and Iola.
Yeah. Well, look, I hope everybody gets to see this film. It's immensely satisfying. Thanks, Billy, for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good to see you. Be well.